All right, folks. So we'll slightly get Arthur off the island. What is Kirsch's next move? Plus a new guest host this week. All of that and more on Game Over. Stay tuned. All right, good afternoon, or I should say good evening to those of you on the East Coast. Good afternoon to those of you on the West Coast. Welcome to Game Over, the show in which we, that is myself and my guest host each week, dissect the episodes of Alien Earth of season one, hopefully, one of many seasons. And the topic of this week will be episode 6, The Fly. And as mentioned, in prior weeks, you know how it goes. We normally get into a quick recap of the said episode that we will be covering on a given episode. And then after, I will introduce our guests for the week. And then we'll get into some analysis of some themes that seem to be prevalent in the episode, as well as some theories that we might have, me and my guest hosts for the said week. And then we'll get into our review. So with that out of the way, I'm going to get into our recap. And just so you guys are aware, as I tell you guys all the time, I will make an effort to do a timestamp for this episode after it's aired live. If you're checking us out live, thank you so much. And if you're catching it after the fact, also appreciate that too. But if you do catch it after the fact, you will have the ability to be able to backtrack or fast forward to your heart's content to a specific part of this said episode. So with that out of the way, as I said, I'm going to get into our recap. One moment. All right. So this week, as I said, is episode 6. Titled as the Fly, and we begin this week's episode with Wendy as she continues to practice her Xenomorph whisperer skills, based off of episode 4's chestburster that is now grown into a young Xenomorph. Observing from outside the lab, Joe, aka Hermit, and Kirsch look on in amazement as they argue over Wendy's future. Meanwhile, thanks to her prior troubling behavior with Dame, Nibs finds herself examined by Dame as well as Arthur and Eames, as all parties mention the potential next steps moving forward with her as one of the hybrids. Two sides materialize: those who prefer to do further therapy regarding her PTSD, that being with Dame and Arthur, versus those who'd rather have her mind wiped of the PTSD triggering event, which, of course, we have Eames in that camp. Eventually, it is settled that a mind wipe of Nibs will be administered, with Arthur refusing to participate, and as a result, being let go as a Prodigy employee. Following Wendy's interaction with the young Xenomorph, Hermit takes things a step further when he broaches the prospect of leaving the Neverland facility. However, to his dismay, the answer he receives from Wendy is far from the one he was anticipating. Elsewhere, Cavalier has his meeting with Yutani regarding his confiscation of her property, a meeting which seems Cavalier, thanks to his knowledge of the various protocols that exist in the laws imposed by the 5 governing companies that run the planet Earth, is able to thwart Yutani's immediate efforts to obtain her specimens back. And back on the Neverland facility, tensions start to escalate as Wendy, following a disturbing interaction with Nibs, confronts Dame after surmising Nibs's memory wipe. Meanwhile, Morrow's manipulation continues as he works on an uneasy slightly to carry out his plan to move a xenomorph specimen off the island, seemingly choosing Hermit to be the host for the xenomorph specimen. He, that is slightly, attempts unsuccessfully to get Hermit into the lab thanks to an interception from a member of Hermit's search and rescue unit, who end up calling for his support as they try to increase the security on the island, this being a consequence of the concerns surrounding a possible Yutani retaliatory offensive. Meanwhile, Wendy revisits the xenomorph, now nearly fully grown, to again make attempts to connect with it. Afterwards, while on his way back to the island, Kirsch reaches out to Isaac to tend to the specimens, a job which, in his eagerness, Isaac does alone. Unfortunately for him, there is a prisoner there who cleverly sabotages his efforts to carry out his job, which results in his demise at the hands of the specimen highlighted in this episode to be the Fly. Elsewhere in the facility, through some help from Arthur, Hermit manages to get the high bridge trackers disabled so that he can sneak his sister off the island. Shortly afterward, Arthur seals his fate when he recognizes Isaac's body in the lab and decides to save him, a decision that plays right into Slightly's hands as he sabotages, sabotages the face huggers confines in the lab and allows Arthur to get face hugged. The episode concludes as Slightly removes Arthur from the lab with the Fly creatures now loose, as Kirsch observes from surveillance, assuring an oblivious Cavalier and company that all is well despite the chaos that awaits them back at the Neverland facility. And that concludes episode 6. So with that, I'm going to get into the introduction of our guest this week. Today's guest is an accomplished screenwriter and director with writing credits that include VHS 2, Lovely Molly, Exists, Altered, and directing credits that include Two Front Teeth, a comedy of horrors, Volume 1, as well as Last Night at Terrace Lane. This weekend, you can find him at the Fright Reads Book Festival. It is my pleasure to welcome onto the show Mr. Jamie Nash. Let me bring him on now. Jamie, hello. How you doing? Hold on. I think you're muted, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I good? Okay.
Yes.
Hey, how's it going? I speak. I live.
So, incredible episode. A lot of things to dive into. Just your initial impressions of the episode. You know, I'm curious to know. Of course, we can get into like the details with the review towards the end, but what just initial impressions? What were your thoughts this week on episode 6?
Yeah, in my opinion, this episode was probably my favorite episode of the bunch.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it shows kind of the promise of this premise, for lack of a better terms. It brought the kind of social network, vibe into the Alien universe completely.
Yes.
But it also has a lot of good Blade Runner-y, we're going in that territory about, synthesis IP, the ethics of that. And it really seems to be taking a next step. Like every single story thread seemed to take a next step. And it's getting into really cool territory. I can feel kind of the final, section of it really ramping up. And it was pretty exciting because I think everything's kind of coming together at once.
For sure. And I think one of the things for me, and I definitely second, what you shared, is I've appreciated their continued use of the new creatures that we have in the series. I love the interaction between Morrow and Kirsch. Please give us more of that. But there is one plot hole that came into play that is the only thing that I'm a little shaky on, and I'd love to know your thoughts on it too, because it a lot of times when we're talking about being able to plant seeds, you establish this in the beginning, so the understanding is that it follows through going forward. So there is one thing that I would like to dive into regarding that, but otherwise, overall, out of a lot of the episodes that we've had so far, like you, I feel like I've enjoyed this episode the most. So in getting into, you know, themes and things that it tackles, one thing that came to mind with me, and of course this is probably going to be just a rephrasing of some things that have come up in other episodes, but I feel like these terms fit a lot better in terms of explaining it, is the idea of having poise and patience versus eagerness. And we've seen a lot of examples of that, where we have characters that are willing to take their time and bide their time, and they seem to be more successful in having that approach, versus those who are very impatient and are kind of bulldozing their way to their goal. We have examples of that. It seems to be in terms of that patience aspect, that long game aspect with M.I.A, with Kirsch, even with one of the creatures, with the Teocellus. And then also with those that just seem to be impatient, which seems to be the overall approach that we have with Prodigy. So, you know, I'm curious to know your thoughts in that component that we've been seeing even in the past, but even especially in this episode.
Well, it seemed like the one thing that they did do this week was give some reasons to ramp up a couple of the, you know, urgencies, for lack of a better term, or that's probably the best term. Like that, and again, I'm really into the social network mixed with aliens aspect of it. So I like Boy Genius and the Wayland Yutani head going head to head in the office. It was very, even some of the dialogue was social network like homage. Like they almost said like this wasn't Social Network, but they said the move fast and break things kind of. I think they said move fast and make $1 billion, which also sounded like Justin Timberlake saying, you know what's cooler than making, you know, $1 billion, $1 trillion or whatever. It sounded like, you know, it could be him. But that whole scene, of course, just shifted things into gear for some urgency and mistakes to be made. You know, now it rushed things along. Now things had to happen right now. So I think that was a cool aspect. I do find sometimes it feels like that the writing is kind of like it wants to take more of the slow play. Like it almost wants 20 episodes, but every now and then it has to take plot jumps.
A big leap.
Bigger leaps maybe. Like it almost could use double the episode order, you know, or something like that. Based on the style. And I'm not sure that would make for a better show. It would make for a slower burn, probably more realistic show. Like sometimes when the show does let me down, it feels like the reasons are because of speed, because it does need to, you know, move things along faster. So every episode delivers like an alien moment or something like that. I think if we had the 22 episode version of this, the twice as long, we would get episodes that didn't deliver on alien payoffs as much. Like you'd almost have to do something that was pretty much all about the boardroom or something there, you know, without where it does seem like every episode delivers on some kind of alien payoff. So I don't know. I think I feel like kind of what you're saying. I think it's the nature of there's a large scope to this project. They're doing a lot. They're showing a lot of things with a limited amount of episodes. Like it almost could be, I wouldn't say this could be 2 seasons, but the scope he bit off with all the different characters, all the different facets, they're juggling like several different themes as well. You know, when you talked about themes, it's like we have, you know, Ex Machina and Blade Runner on one side, you know, that's there. You have the original Alien, some of the themes of the original Alien, you know, that like the Nostromo, if I remember correctly, that's from like a Conrad, you know, story, about greed and corporate greed and national greed as far as that goes. They're balancing that story, but then you get all kinds of, so they're doing all these different sides of these stories. And then you get even like Kirsch, like what's he up to and things like that. They're throwing in boardroom drama, family drama, and
Yeah.
it's just there's a lot of scope here. So I guess I forgive them for being a little stylized sometimes and kind of skipping to the chase. And also, if I'm not, you might know this better than I. Wasn't this show kind of constructed a little strangely? Like maybe he did the whole first episode before doing things. Like it almost has a feel um, of I don't know. It feels like a show that maybe he kind of made some stuff up that if he could go back to the beginning, maybe change a couple things up a little bit. At times, it feels like it maybe how he constructed it causes those issues as well.
Got you.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say no to what you're saying. I know that when the show was still they were still kind of in that PR phase of kind of ramping up the publicity surrounding it. I know that there initially seemed to be some confusion of where it fell on the timeline, and I know a lot of people were saying, "Oh, okay, it clearly is a couple of years, prior to the events of the first Alien," and then after some interviews that happened, it seemed like that wasn't the case. But in watching this show, it seems like the former is the case.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the reasoning why there has been on the part of the folks doing the team, whether it's Noah or any of the cast members of talking about where it falls setting wise, is perhaps if they get other additional seasons, that maybe it will start intersecting with other points in the timeline, whether it's overlapping into Alien or overlapping into Aliens.
Right.
But at least for right now, it seems to be clearly a few years before. But go ahead.
Do you feel like this is kind of a riff, not necessarily about this episode, but I'm just interested in your opinion.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll get that big payoff moment, like Bishop shows up, or the Nostromo is launched, or something like that? Do you think they'll give us that by the end of the final episode?
I feel like I don't think we're going to get it this season because they have, like, to your point, you said that there's a lot of ground to cover, and there's still so much that they've introduced that they haven't even touched on. We have some of the creatures, which I want to get into, by the way, that we still haven't seen what they do.
Right.
We have corporations that have been introduced that we still don't know how they operate. We don't know what they specialize in. Right now, we just have the 2, and from what we understand, there are 5 of them. So there's still so much ground to cover just with the existing stuff that they've introduced that I'm not sure if they'll even, have time, or if it'll even make sense for them to kind of to place that in there. If they place it in there at this point, based on what they've been focusing on thus far, it would just seem like it's being pigeonholed in versus it seamlessly being added in a future season. I would be perfectly okay with them maybe adding it as a cliffhanger, maybe at the midway point of season 2, if assuming they have a season 2, the midway point of season 2, or maybe at the end of a season 2. Because I still have and I have no proof of this, but I still have an idea that they're kind of using this as a way to introduce the other corporations. Because I feel like based on the chaos of what happens, there's going to be a power vacuum where the other companies are going to kind of scramble now that Prodigy kind of goes down. Which seems to make sense. I could be wrong. They may not do that, but it would seem like the logical way to do that, to kind of incorporate the remaining companies and kind of give value to those other companies and who they are and how they operate.
Yeah, there's part of me when I see these other companies, because of course these other companies, as far as I know, I'm not like an expert in alien canon. I don't know that any of them except Weyland-Yutani really are dominant. So does that mean Weyland-Yutani destroys all these companies before the events of Alien?
Right. I feel like in that regard, when you're talking about the slow burn, that perhaps that is what the assumption is that what we get as our end game. But I feel like they are going to draw out a lot more of the interactions and how Utani eventually, supersedes everyone else. But at least for the time being, I think that they're still going to have to contend if they for what they probably will do for the other seasons, that they will try to utilize them more, because I feel like even with the creatures, I don't know if you heard my theory, but about one of the creatures, but I feel like somehow with one of the creatures, they're going to utilize another party with one of the other corporations as well. But you brought up just a moment ago, you brought up the idea of Blade Runner, and a lot of times, very much in Blade Runner, they kind of get into the idea of what it means to be human, what it means to not be human, and really examining that. And I'm curious to know your thoughts with what we have in this episode, where kind of similar. This kind of is a tangent off of what I mentioned before with the impatience and the and the poise that a lot of the other characters have, the restraint that they have, that it seems like we're kind of getting into an analysis of are the qualities that make someone human something that is advantageous to them, or something that is their undoing? Because we have some hybrids that despite the fact that they are in essence, aside from their consciousness, an android, synthetic, however phrase you want to coin, when they try to attempt to have some form of humanity or traits of humanity, it gets them in trouble. So like we have an instance of that when we're talking about the PTSD that that Nibs experiences. It's something that she has to contend with, regardless of the fact of her physical condition. You have the same thing that happens with Isaac. He's so eager, right? So eager to be able to impress his superior and the ego of oh no, I don't need any help, I can do it all by myself. When the logic would tell him, the logical answer would be no, you want to have an additional support system to be able to carry out these tasks, which, to his credit, which I really get a kick out of with Kirsch. He explains it, you have to go through step by step by step. And I think he kind of knows that he's not going to do that, but he always provides this opportunity for a lot of the characters, a lot of the hybrids, to be able to work with a sense of poise and to work with a sense of restraint, because he has this idea in his head that in not having that restraint and having those emotional ties, so to speak, that it makes our hybrids vulnerable. So I don't know how you feel about that, or what they decide.
There's a great line in there. The scientific method is a method, not a suggestion box. There's a whole bunch of really good lines in this episode. The one thing that I don't know if you could take this as a bug or a feature in some ways, but it's the fact that they wiped her memory, but then didn't really think of the ramifications of just, they did for this big prodigy thought out place. They really kind of make a lot of mistakes, right? And and in some ways it feels kind of stylized, like I almost don't buy that they'd be that stupid to wipe her brain and not tell anybody, or not figure out maybe we should make up a good excuse for this, or something.
Not bring it back to another hybrid to be able to figure out wow, you just wiped out this other comrade's memory.
Right. And maybe it's that speaks to the hubris of them, and how they don't think of them as humans. Maybe that's really showing that they just think, because you wouldn't try to come up with a rationale for a machine in your house. Like you wouldn't have to tell your lawnmower why you got a new leaf blower. You know what I mean? So maybe that speaks to their hubris or something. So here's one thing that I found very interesting. I don't know if this is just one of these dumb, like this episode of 2 or 3, like my father or your father fought in the Clone Wars kind of things that they just threw out there, that I latch onto those things. I love those things.
Yeah.
And there were 2 of those in particular. There might have been 3, but I can't remember the third. So I'll give you my 2.
Okay.
And one of these is related to this a little bit. The first one was the faster than light speed.
Okay.
Because what that says is that they can't currently go faster than light speed, which is kind of, in a weird sort of way, it's kind of mind blowing, because if you can't go faster than light speed, you're relatively close to the Earth in some ways if you're flying. You know what I mean? Even if you're in cryo, you're not getting super far. So does that suggest that? I don't know. My mind was kind of blown by that, the faster than light speed, because I made some assumptions about that. And then I wondered if that was like a setup for something that will come in season 2 or season 3. You know, they'll get deeper in space or faster than light. The aliens will bring about faster than light speed. You know, things like that, right?
Sure.
Like maybe faster than light speed is the real thing they're chasing in this show, and the xenomorphs are somehow a key to it. Like they know how to do that, or I don't know, something. And I started to like, so that things like that blow my mind. And I can't tell if it's my father fought in the Clone Wars or if that was like purposefully seeded. The other one that definitely was more like my father fought in the Clone Wars is the Brubaker Accords. When they said the Brubaker Accords, they said, according to the Brubaker. And I'm like, whoa, Brubaker Accords, what is that? You know, is that something I missed from the comic books or something? You know, I wanted to know what the Brubaker Accords were. And then it tells me there may be a whole Clone Wars prequel to this show, you know, Brubaker Accords, alien connection, because it almost sounds like it's a containment thing, like some alien thing happened here before, and they had to set about quarantine rules based on this, and they're the Brubaker Accords. So these things just kind of blew my mind to a certain extent. But then, along the lines of your question, like going back to this company kind of, I don't know, is run by knuckleheads to an extent. Like even to an extent, like when that scene where the one guy kind of uses his screen to hide the message and he types something real quick.
Yeah.
And you're like, they don't have they have all these kind of safeguards, but they can't figure that part out. Like
they can't track what the messages that are coming in on
they did have logs and alerts and stuff.
Right.
And it's like it's kind of and truth be told, this is, again, I've said it a couple of times, a stylized universe because they are using old technology and things like that. So you kind of have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, like with some of that stuff. But I don't know, even if I was them, I'd probably put some kind of visual tracking system in all my IP, meaning the Lost Boys or the Lost Kids. But they don't have that either. You know what I mean? And it seems like that would be a logical step for a company that's so controlling and paranoid and things like that. So, and maybe that just speaks to the move fast and break things. Like maybe it is being run by too few people. Maybe there aren't enough systems in place. Maybe Boy Genius is kind of running the show and overextended because he just does what he's interested in, and maybe he skips over the boring stuff. You know what I mean? Maybe he's not, his attention to detail isn't where it should be, and his employees are almost overstretched or something like that. So
could be.
That's kind of where my mind goes. There's sometimes that kind of stuff takes me out of the show a little bit. Like,
well, you have to think that hard to be able to rationalize the choices that they're making. For sure.
I'm like, come on, like even a lot of what happens at the end of this episode with when the creatures attack and things, like the guy like dragging the body out of the thing, and I'm like, come on, there's a lot of like B-movie horror kind of stuff that we'll be right back, kind of stuff.
For sure. For sure.
Which is, I mean, at its roots, that's what Alien is to an extent. So I forgive it somewhat, but there are moments sometimes where I'm like,
I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm not gonna lie to you, like the fact that we didn't have, and I mean, those are still things that you mentioned that are things that like I forgave a bit, and I forgave a bit based on what came before, because there were things that came before where I just like threw my hands. I was like, really? Like
Right.
there's so many. When we're talking about the Alien franchise, and I mentioned this before, I love the Alien franchise, but I am objective enough to know that there are symptoms with the franchise that keep happening again and again, where I'm like, okay, like we got to figure out another way to somehow figure out the aliens somehow breaking loose or the aliens attacking humans. It can't just be because of dumb decisions that humans make. Because I mean, there have been installments of the Alien franchise where it's very logical, where you understand the choices that they're making. The first film, you know, they were wearing equipment, like, which is why I love that film. They were wearing equipment, which would make sense if you're not accustomed to that atmosphere. But in other installments, you have characters again who are in the medical field, and I'm like, you're in the medical field, you're not wearing gloves, you're not
Like
wearing a mask, you're not wearing
Prometheus, I think, has a classic scene like that, right? Prometheus, where he's playing
yeah,
the guy's playing with the flower, like he's like the
yeah.
smartest guy. He's like, "Oh, aren't
Covenant,
you cute?" And it's like,
Covenant, yeah,
Covenant. That's the
yeah,
one. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Where I'm like, you guys have never been on this planet. Like, you have no idea what you're going to encounter, what you're going to experience, and you guys, oh yeah, this is an atmosphere just like Earth. We're good. Like, no, you don't know. It may very well be like Earth, but you don't know what other native things that are on that planet that could be, you know, dangerous to you. Like,
Right.
so just having a gun is not going to like do the job. Like, a lot of those things could have been avoided if they were wearing, you know, protective gear. And the
Yeah.
thing that I was going to say, the things that make it scary is the fact that a lot of times when you're making logical choices, or your characters are making logical choices, despite that fact, they still, you know,
Right.
succumb to their
They're always
fate.
one step ahead.
Yeah. So, but when it sometimes, like you said, a lot of times when it's situations like that where it just seems like the character's just begging to get killed somehow, it makes it less suspenseful, and it just makes it like comedic sometimes.
There's something about the lab that these people are supposed to be kind of the best of the best, the smartest of the smartest, and they're playing around in this lab like there's some $10 an hour employee at the
Yeah, eating
aquarium store.
sandwiches, drinking water, like you just anything could have happened. I'm like, you get what you deserve because of that choice that you made of drinking water and eating a sandwich in a lab. So I mean, there have been instances like that have of what has come before. There was even the instance with the search and rescue group where if you're a search and rescue group and you have this building that is damaged, there, you know, environmental things that can happen with that, asbestos, so many different chemicals, things that can happen that can result from this building being destroyed. And they just, you know, came in, went into the building to investigate that ship kind of willy-nilly.
It's almost like there's a theme that the hiring practices of the future are not very good.
Lax.
Very lax. Like there's no good employees. It's really hard to find any good employees in the future in the Alien universe. And in some ways, I don't know, maybe that does bear out, because when I think of the Alien franchise, even Space Marines are a little goofy. You know, it's like everybody is a little not great. They're kind of like almost every employee seems like a construction worker or something like that. You know, it's like, what's this jackhammer do or something? You know, it's like they start playing with it.
So, but getting into theories, there were a couple that I had, you know, tried to plant some seeds of at the top, and I would love to know if there's some theories that you have that I don't get into here, and you know what your perspective is on those that I have. And one that comes up is just the idea of, I mean, a basic one. Do we feel like Arthur will be a dad before he makes it off the island?
Yeah.
Or will he make it off the island? I don't know. Maybe you feel like he will somehow get off the island, or maybe you feel like he won't make it, and he'll get his wish of being a parent, which was kind of, touched on at the top of the series.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I tend to, it's weird with shows now. I don't know what it is. I tend not to derive too many theories while I'm watching. I tend to just watch it. But I'll tell you the things that strike me, like sometimes I'm like doing some, my writer brain won't turn off.
Yeah.
And it's close to theories. I don't know that these are theories, but I'm really interested in where Wendy talking to the alien is going to go.
Okay.
Is the alien going to become a protector of her and maybe even protect her against other aliens at some point? Because I'm like, that's something we haven't really seen, is alien on alien combat. You know?
Alien Civil War. Yeah.
Alien Civil War to an extent. There's part of me that wonders at the end of this whole thing, and this is kind of what we were talking about before. Do the aliens get unleashed on the Earth and screw the franchise? You know what I mean? Is it just going to be like game on? Like, are they going to maybe they'll be trying to quarantine these things in small levels, but will aliens get free? Is another question I have. It's almost a Jurassic Park franchise kind of thing.
Yeah, no.
I once had a chance to pitch, like at a low level, an alien project. This was kind of
really?
Alien, the Alien vs. Predator days. And I remember I didn't have really any pitches. And this was a very low level. It's not like this was a big pitch that anybody was taking seriously. I had a lot of these weird pitches. Like one time I had to pitch Michael Myers versus Hellraiser to Dimension. Yeah, Dimension was trying to. It was during the Freddy versus Jason days.
Yeah.
And I had no idea how to do that either. And they never did it. It was a dumb idea. So I remember my alien pitch was a post-apocalyptic world. It was basically Walking Dead with aliens.
Okay.
I was like, what happens if the aliens do get to Earth and they wipe out civilization essentially, but there's pockets of civilization left, but the aliens basically rule the world. And I almost wonder if that's, when I watch this, and maybe it's my bias, I'm like, I wonder if that's where the show's headed. And I wonder if that's why they're playing fast and loose with the timeline, because maybe it has nothing. Maybe the rest of the timeline is just forget it. You're going to get to a point, because that's a big way to surprise you. Like, oh, this isn't the timeline at all. This nothing in Alien matters. And I keep wondering if they're going to do something, they're going to pull a trick like that. Like, canon be damned, we're just here. Screw your Ridley Scott movie. You know what I mean? Or if they do pull a Luke Skywalker shows up at the end, and it's Luke Skywalker. And I keep alternating between the two. I keep trying to figure out like what the Luke Skywalker moment would be.
Okay.
And I can't figure out, would it be Ripley? So I can't imagine it'd be Ripley, because they're just truckers that accidentally stumbled upon the thing. You know what I mean? It's not like so Ripley and stuff, that doesn't make sense to me as much. Bishop could make sense, because he could have been mind wiped or something like that. But anyway, as you can see, my mind keeps going to what the final episode's going to be. I just don't think it's going to be like a conservative kind of ending where it's like, and of course season 2 will show more of the same intrigue, but at the Weyland-Yutani lab. That, because one way you could see this ending is Prodigy gets wiped out somehow. Weyland-Yutani steps in, and now they have the aliens.
Yeah, absorbs everything.
It's kind of more of the same. It's kind of a start at a new lab or something, and the scope's bigger or something. But maybe they have a new mission or new, Wendy is the Whisperer, and she can get the faster than light speed out of it or something. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where this. So anyway, I don't have any like individual theories, like what Kirsch is up to and stuff like that. Do you have those kind of theories?
I do. And before I get into some of those, I'm curious, based off of what you said, and I know sometimes it can be tricky, as you mentioned, to turn off your screenwriter hat. So have there been things that you have observed thus far in the 6 episodes where it's like, I see what they're doing there. That's interesting. Like you mentioned one example of that. Have there been other examples of that where there have been other things that you haven't mentioned yet that you with your screenwriter hat in times where it has come into play that you have said, okay, I see what you're doing there. I understand what you're doing there. I got what you're doing there.
I tell you, the one thing I've noticed about this show, and it's not so much like I got what you're doing there.
Yeah.
This show is a really interesting show. I've been watching it on a DVR for whatever reason. At first, I was thinking about parking my Hulu for a little while because I wasn't really watching anything.
Okay.
And so I started DVR FX. I was like, I'm going to DVR FX. And I ended up keeping Hulu, but for some reason, I always watch it on my DVR, right? So
hey, I get it. Something about that.
There's something about it. I don't have to flip the smart TV on. You know, I go from NFL football to Alien Earth. And the weird thing about this show is the commercial breaks are very strange. They come in random places, and you probably don't even notice this when you watch it on Hulu, but they just come in random places. And the way this story is told is actually very interesting and almost feels like it's a show I wish was on Netflix, because I do feel like, unlike like a Game of Thrones where you need like a week, I was talking to a friend of mine, and after Game of Thrones, you needed like a week off. You're like, it was enough. I need a week off. I need to think about this.
Process what happened that week.
Talk to some people. I feel like with this show, I can almost always, I feel like going into the next episode pretty much every time. I feel like I could use more. I crave a little bit more out of the story. And I don't know what that it is about this show that does that. I think it's because they have so many story threads, and so some of the story threads only get like 2 scenes.
Yes. I got what you're. And it's a situation where you're like, oh, you're about to get there, but
So what it does, it feels like, and I'll tell you what Game of Thrones did to kind of mask that, but what this show does is it gives each of the storylines like 2 threads. So it makes the show, which gives a lot of story, and I don't know what the timelines, do you know what the times are on these? Like how long these episodes are? Have they been like 50 minutes?
Hour? They've been between like high 40s. Like I want to say like high 40s. I know there have been certain episodes that have been longer. Obviously, episode 5, it seemed like they wanted to make it almost into a movie, so it was a little over an hour.
Yeah.
But the other ones were relatively shorter. I want to say like high 40s.
And for that reason, in an episode like this, as opposed to episode 5, which was the other style, it feels like you don't get a lot of story, even though they pack 50 minutes. It's like 2 things happen for each storyline, and then they kind of, combine all that, as opposed to like episode 5, where it was all focused pretty much on one storyline, and you just kind of, the flashback, and it kind of went through the whole time, and you felt like you got a lot of story out of that one. In a lot of these, it just feels like, and it's not boring at all. That's the thing, because it's almost, I want more. I moved through it really fast, and I'm like, well, give me some more of this stuff. Give me some more of this stuff. So it's an interesting way to do it. Game of Thrones, what it did, like, because Game of Thrones had a lot of POVs too. It kind of was careful. Like some episodes were more heavy towards certain storylines. It would shift gears a lot more as opposed to balance. It would be like, this is going to be an all Tyrion episode, or this is going to be an all this, as opposed to what this show does, which I think, carefully maintains the timeline that's going through the whole thing, and just make sure you see most of the storylines. Most of the storylines get a touch in each episode, with the exception of episode 5. And I don't know that it's a problem at all. I think if it was bingeable, I think it wouldn't be a problem at all. I'd be like ripping through it. But watching it week to week, I think sometimes I come away and I'm like, man, I wish it was more. I wish I had 2 hours of episode as opposed to 1 hour.
For sure. And to your point, answer your question about some of the other theories. And thank you for that, by the way, because you know, I'm always fascinated to kind of get a peek on that thought process of that, you know, director's brain or that screenwriting brain of the things that are normally happening in that storytelling process. So in talking about some of the other theories, it seems that Kirsch has this big plan, this long game plan, and I'm trying to grasp like what maybe it might be. Maybe it's him being able to prove to do a couple of things. One, to get from under Cavalier's thumb, because there have been so many instances in their interaction where, as smart as Cavalier likes to think of himself to be, he doesn't really pick up on like a lot of social cues, or maybe he just doesn't care, because there have been a lot of instances in those interactions that he's had with Kirsch where Kirsch has like little flinches here and there where it's like, okay, you rubbed me the wrong way and what you said to me here, but I'm gonna I'm gonna continue, you know, to do as I'm told. And he's just basically, you know, biding his time. Like, I know one thing that I have observed that has been fascinating is, and I don't think this has been something that has been discussed a lot, is he's been observing this whole thing between Morrow and Slightly. Like, he's been surveilling the whole thing, listening in on the whole thing. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's your end game? I think it's a combination of him just being curious and observing how things play out, because he's just curious with the type of mind that he has. And then also, I think it's also a means to prove the conversation that he had with what's her name, with Wendy in the beginning of the series. Like, they had that conversation when they were heading to the crash site, where he was talking about that idea of humans being prey. At one point they were prey because they developed as a species. They were no longer prey, and now even despite that, they may still end up becoming prey at the end of the day, or they can still succumb to the limitations that they have of being organic. And so I think that's also kind of his way of proving that point of saying, you know, look, see, I told you, this is exactly what I was trying to explain to you before. You know, my stance and what I was trying to the future that I had intended for you all is the one that I feel is the right one, versus the limitations of what it means to be human, or what your former lives were. So that part has been fascinating, because even in the conversation that he has with Slightly, while some people, you know, I believe have been stating that he was addressing that to Slightly, if you look at it again, it seems like he's asking for permission more so than, you know, trying to test Slightly, where he's saying, okay, you know, hypothetically, if this were to happen, you know, if things go awry, you know, where do your allegiances lie? Where you know, who do you who are you going to ally yourself with? And when he says family, you know, he attributes that to, okay, with Archon, with myself and the hybrids, who are, you know, the next stage of what it means to be in essence, a synthetic, taking it a step further in his head, I suppose. So that has been fascinating, of his very kind of sneaky way of reaching his ends, because I also feel like he's utilizing Morrow and kind of goading Morrow to play right into his hand, because he's anticipating of what he's going to do without Morrow even knowing, being aware that he's that far ahead.
He's a really interesting character. So I actually find him the most fascinating character.
Yeah.
But so I'll give you my weird, like, take on him in this episode. Like,
Okay.
on one hand, you get he's probably the biggest actor in the show, Timothy
Yes.
Olyphant, right? He's probably,
Yeah.
but he's kind of hasn't had much to do yet. But his ambiguity is kind of the thing that's so interesting about him, right? He
Yeah.
kind of draws you forward because we
Yeah.
don't know, because we really don't know what he's doing, and that's what's interesting about him. But Timothy Olyphant playing this character, the combination of the two, is just really intriguing, and it kind of every time he's on screen, we're kind of interested in what he's up to. So on one hand, I'm like, is his ambiguity just a quirky character trait? You know,
Yeah.
sometimes it
Character
feels,
choice. Yeah.
is it just a character trait that they
Yeah.
built in, you know, that he's just this kind of quirky, weird guy, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? That might ultimately play a big factor in the end because of his weird quirks and his almost philosophical approach or his deep thinking or whatever. But will the final revelation of what he does and how he factors into the end of the story, will it be a crime of opportunity or I think a lot of online chatter, and I don't read this too much, maybe you do, feels like he's up to something. He's got a big plan. He's playing chess here. He's got the chessboard out. I don't know if he is or not. And I mean, maybe that's what makes him interesting. I mean, most of the last episode was him looking at like an iPad. Like that's what he did. He looked at an iPad and talked to people on the phone, you know? And it seems really weird to get Timothy Olyphant and then have him do that to an extent. So I have this feeling there's a huge payoff coming. And it could just be that he's an interesting character and he makes a deep sacrifice or shows humanity or leads the synthetics to victory in some way or survival or, you know, whatever. It could just be as simple as that.
Yeah.
Or they could have a huge play coming about, you know, with him. And I can't figure it out. And I mean, that is the crux of the question, but that's where my mind is. It's like, which direction will they go? If I had to bet on it, I think it would be more opportunistic than this big chess thing that he had planned and a twist or something like that. I think it would just end up being that there's some opportunity that presents itself, and whether it's leadership or sacrifice or something like that, he kind of comes to the final test of how he's a superior being, puts that into action.
Yeah.
And,
I think we're in agreement on that. Yeah. For sure.
Whereas I what I see online, and this is my question to you, is I see a lot of other kind of suspicions that there's some big nefarious plan and he's putting players on the board, and all of a sudden it's all going to come to light.
I guess the only reason why I feel like it's a hybridization of what you're talking about and him, you know, having a plan, because I don't feel like it's accidental that they keep having these, just like you said, they keep having these moments where we're given insight into how his mind works. We had the instance where it was the interaction where we had him and Dame. I want to say this was episode 1, right when Wendy became Wendy, like shortly after, and they were having a Dame and Kirsch were having a conversation with Wendy to kind of see, now that she's just newly become this hybrid, how she operated and if, you know, everything was working smoothly. And that gave some insight, I feel, into kind of his disdain, it felt like, when it came to humanity. A lot of the reactions that he had with Cavalier, where Cavalier was kind of condescending and patronizing to him in different interactions that they have, where they seem to purposely visually make a point to show his reaction to different things that Cavalier does. Even in this episode, it wasn't necessary for them to show his reaction after the meeting with Yutani. They could have just had the Yutani meeting happen and then they could have just ended the scene. But they made a point to show his reaction after kind of gaslighting Yutani and manipulating that situation. Like, they made a point to do that. So like all of these instances, like you said, they wouldn't get someone of his caliber, or I don't feel like he would agree to do it if there wasn't something juicier there, however small. Even if, earlier in the arc, it's finding your moments, but by the end of it, really kind of letting yourself, spread your wings, so to speak. I feel like there is a end game of him proving the point to Cavalier that he is superior to Cavalier, of him somehow getting Cavalier from under his thumb and utilizing those creatures somehow to take out Cavalier. And like you said, he has an opportunity now with this whole Morrow situation where he doesn't even have to take blame for it. He basically is going to end up gaslighting Morrow based off of the scheme that he has in play, and it will kind of be able to kind of wipe his hands of it and say that he wasn't at fault when he allowed it to happen because he wanted to basically utilize them as to his own ends. So
yeah, that makes sense. The one other thing that I heard somebody talking about today, I was actually at Freight Reads. I was having a conversation with somebody about Alien Earth, and
not
they
Dan,
are,
Dan
what's that?
Dan?
Dan. It was Dan.
Shout out Dan. He was our guest last week.
and Dan actually mentioned, like, I think he posed the suggestion that was it him that said this? No, I'm not sure if it was him that said this or somebody else that chimed in, but
Okay.
that the sheep or whatever, the eyeball, kind of like the idea, was the eyeball up to something, like, was it the mastermind of the escape or was it scheming something else? It reminded me of what I'm thinking about Timothy Oliphant. Like, it was that the monster there, they love showing it. It's such a good visual.
Yeah.
It's kind of ambiguous, we just get this creepy, and we can't tell, like, if it's an observer or if it's the one behind it all with the intelligence. But I think I saw something with Noah Hawley where he was kind of doing that thing, and he mentioned the mastermind kind of aspect to it. So I'm not sure if that solves it or not. Yeah,
I was gonna say they do have a moment of it in this episode, because I watched it watched the episode rewatched a couple of times, and I didn't catch it the first time, but in watching it in the repeat viewings, I did see it. Okay. Is that they do show a moment earlier in the episode when they are going through, kind of doing a montage of all the creatures that are confined in the lab. They show Teocelis, and they show him look up at the hive at the beginning of the episode, as if he is already kind of trying to plan of how can I utilize these guys over here to somehow escape, because I feel like he wanted to utilize them, and I feel like to some degree it didn't play out the way he wanted it to, because it still didn't allow him to escape, even though it created the chaos that he wanted. It still didn't allow him to escape. So I feel like it kind of played into his hand, but there was a sense of, like you said, utilizing the opportunity, but unfortunately the opportunity not playing out the way he anticipated. So that was fascinating, seeing like, oh wow, I didn't catch that last time, that they're trying to plant the seed there visually, that it was considering, how am I going to utilize my cellmate here to somehow get out of here. One thing that I will say that was weird though, and I don't know if you felt this in watching it, is that it seemed like it smirked at one point after when it got when it got Isaac locked into the room, like after it hit the hit against the wall and caused the door to lock. I was like, are they trying to like somehow give, I mean, obviously there is some sense of emotion in the sheep, but are they also trying to say that it's powerful enough to actually, somehow
Right.
tear the creature in a way to show sadness or
Hmm.
happiness or
Hmm.
something? Because it seemed kind of weird that it seemed like it was smiling. And then anyone out there can let me know if you guys felt the same way. That
it,
was like, oh, okay, this is. I don't know if they're trying to be silly here,
it
or if
might
it
be.
just,
It might be like when you see a picture of a dog and you project like the
yeah,
feelings, and the dog
yeah,
always looks the same, but you're like, oh, it looks sad. Oh, it looks
right.
happy. But no, I'm sure they tweaked it in some way that, and camera angles and everything else. I'm sure they can make it look kind of, different. But I didn't notice that. I'd have to check it out, whether it had a evil grin or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Let me know because or those of you out there, maybe you guys, felt that too. Or I was like, they're not doing this.
Hmm.
They're not going down this road. But another thing that I caught was seemingly based on how the story played out, and I love to know your thoughts on this. Is there's been a lot of talk about Kirsch having a plan, but do we feel that Wendy has one?
Mm-hmm.
Because after she has her interaction or her blowout, so to speak, with Dane,
Hmm.
she makes an interesting choice. She goes back to the Xenomorph and starts talking with the Xenomorph. So, like, was that
Yeah.
just her making the choice of, just following what she was told to do of trying to figure out this Xenomorph language, or was she actually trying to communicate with the Xenomorph and say, hey, you know, I'm trying to get out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. I know you don't want to be here anymore. Let's figure out a way to kind of work together to get out of here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
may,
I if that isn't what happened, and I'm not sure if it is, I think that is the way this story's going. I definitely think there's going to be mutiny, and I definitely think she's going to either trust the xenomorph and it's going to betray her in some horrible fashion, or she's going to end up being, kind of the xenomorph buddy at the end, and somehow they're going to go off together or something, like, there's some connection that will be established that'll continue to season 2.
for
But
sure.
I definitely think what you just said, after this episode especially, that's there we're gonna, there's gonna be a mutiny coming up very soon. Yeah.
So let me ask this, and this is the last theory that I have. And I mentioned it at the top. We've got to peek at each of these creatures. Why do you feel? And I love to know your thoughts on this, especially in with being a screenwriter, and maybe you have some insight into this. Why we haven't seen the plant creature yet? Like why do they still seem to be holding back on this creature when I feel like this would have been the episode, just like with the fly, to show what it was capable of?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe
Why are
they
they
just
holding back and waiting so
that
long?
it's a good question, and maybe that means it's going to figure in a big way. I mean, there's really two choices here.
Okay.
One is it's sloppy, writing, or they had enough other things to deal with, and they
Yeah.
just didn't want to add
And they
one
kind of,
more. I wouldn't
yeah.
even say sloppy, but they just couldn't get to it. And the
Yeah.
other one is they have a big plan for that one, and they needed to hold it off at least one more episode.
Gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha.
but I mean, it could, in either one, it's like two diametrically opposed things. One, we may never see it again, pretty much, or see it in some
God, let's
small
hope.
way. Yeah,
Let's
and
hope
then
not.
the other will see it in some big way.
Yeah. Or
So
maybe, who knows? Maybe they're trying to they cooked up some devastating way for Cavalier to meet his end.
right.
And maybe it takes, being killed by in many different ways by different creatures so
Hmm.
far all at once
Hmm.
for to make it into to have a character like that to have a satisfying end, because I know a lot of people have, like, as a and fittingly so, and this is to the credit to the actor too of how he's been portraying Cavalier, is people have been hating Cavalier. This
Right.
like steadily hating this character as the episodes have continued. So with a character like that, you can't just like off him just with a simple like xenomorph death. Like it probably has to be something like very elaborate, like between the what is it, the Teocellus, killing him somehow or removing his eye, and then it somehow transitioning into him being snatched up maybe by the, like you said, to the plant creature and saving it for some big payoff. So
right. It's funny that you mentioned that, because it's kind of like there's the Sam Raimi rules of horror, which in my new book, I wrote about this in my new writing book. So it's the innocent must suffer, the guilty must be punished, and the hero must taste blood to be a man. They're like the rules.
yeah.
But the guilty must be punished is that one. And in my book, I kind of described how in movies there's this thing that there's this, when you're doing gross out scenes or scare scenes,
Yeah.
There's definitely like a karmic equation to the, like if somebody you like gets killed, maybe sometimes they get killed quickly, fast. But then, of course, the person we really want to see die
slowly, very, very painfully,
it's going to be
slowly.
a big spectacular moment. So, I mean, it goes back almost to like King Kong, like the guy who brought King Kong over, getting stepped on by Kong and being like, and
I mean, it's historically happened with like some movies. Like for those of you that, I love Blade, and historically, like with the first Blade movie, I don't know if you know this story, but initially when they had shown it to test audiences, and it's even in the DVD for those that have the DVD, is the way that Deacon Frost originally was supposed to die is not the way he originally was going to die. Like they had some weird CG thing of him being some like blood tornado in the spirit of that character that he was supposed to be. What is it, a little Magra or something? And because when they showed it to test audiences, they said that test audiences were going along for the ride the entire thing, and then they checked out after like that part because they wanted him to actually meet his end and not be this kind of like blood tornado. They wanted him to actually be a physical entity that Blade could somehow destroy. So they went back and changed it where instead of him being this tornado, Blade actually physically made contact with him, and they actually fought, and he met like a devastating end, and then they were good. But because the character was so despicable throughout the whole movie, and people like so badly wanted him to like suffer, that character, that villain to suffer, they had to basically redo the ending to satisfy the the audience.
The guilty must be punished. That's what Sam Raimi said, and I think the punished part is the key part. When somebody's guilty, everybody wants to see the punishment. So
indeed. So
punishment is probably coming.
For sure. So getting into the review as we wrap up here, this is always a fun part of getting into the Jonesy of it all. I love to know your thoughts, Jamie, of where you place this episode. If we are utilizing our cat emojis here, and 5 being like a perfect episode, 4 being a good one, and 3 being average, where does episode 6 fall for you?
I'm probably going to give it. It's funny. It's my most enjoyable episode, but maybe episode 5 even got 5 cats for me in some ways.
Okay.
But in this one, I'm going to give it 4.5, and I'll ding in a little bit for some of those goofy security lapses, we'll call them, that happened.
Yeah.
Some of those things that took me a little bit out of the story. I'll ding it a little bit for that, but very entertaining. I love the way the story's moving forward, and I love all the shifting kind of things. I just can feel the end coming, and sometimes the ends disappoint in these shows. So sometimes these are the best episodes, the ones that lead up to the end are the best episodes.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm definitely in that camp with you, in that episode 5 for me would have been a perfect episode, but it was just the dumb choices that a lot of the human characters were making that brought it down for me. But other than that, like the creatures were amazing, like the way it was paced, I enjoyed. It seemed like a fun alien film. It's just that I couldn't get past or make peace with some of the choices that some of the characters were making especially the doctor and the science officer and some of the choices that they made throughout that episode, where in moments it took me out. So, but with this episode, I agree. It's 4.5 for me. 4.5 being because of, I know I mentioned the plot hole at the top. The plot hole that bothered me, and this is a very small nitpick, is we had it established by Cavalier where he set a rule that no organics would be able to enter the lab. And under that assumption, I would have assumed security wise that because of that, no one that was organic would even be able to open or access the lab. And somehow the lab was still accessed. And I mean, I'll look at it again, because I have a feeling that I'll get some comments out there. Well, this happened and this happened. Well, if memory serves slightly, and I could be wrong about this, maybe you recall this, Jamie, is slightly didn't go into the lab first. If memory serves, Arthur went in first and slightly followed him, which tells me that he still would have been able to get into the lab without an inorganic's help. And if that is a rule that's being set, I would assume that the security measures would be set in place that would prevent any organics of any kind to be able to enter the lab. Now, I know there could be a rationalization, maybe Kirsch mess with the security protocols and allowed it so that organics can enter because it's playing into whatever this long game he's playing, that we believe he's playing. But I would have felt better. And I know everything doesn't need to be explained to you, but I feel like in a case like that, it would have been helpful to see him tamper or sabotage with that. Of us seeing some type of visual cue of seeing, just like they've been showing in him observing slightly, of him messing with that and showing some visual cue that only inorganics have it, even if it's something that we're seeing visually on his pad, that inorganics are the only ones who have access, and we see him tamper with it and say organics also. Like something, because it didn't make sense to make such a big deal out of that and not follow through with your own rule that you established earlier.
I still think it's the bad security of this prodigy company. It's it's kind of, and I guess this really is what Alien universe they've made it out to be. It's 1970s technology in the future. And, in 1970s technology, they probably weren't that good at doing that. They just had like a 3-digit passcode, like it was like Monday or something. They'd type in, or 1, 2, 3, 4. They'd go in, So I don't know. It feels like they want you to check your brain with some of that stuff. Like almost say, think it's 1970 in half the brain. And in your other half of the brain, they're able to make synthetics with human intellect or something. So you kind of have to mix and match. You're like, well, if in 1970 they could do this, but they still couldn't do this, and that's kind of the way I feel about the show a little bit. Because in 1970s, you probably could just type in like open sesame as the password and get in the door or something like that.
That's fair. That's fair. But I mean, other than that nitpick, like I said, any of the scenes between Morrow and Kirsch are gold. I hope that they have more of it. I hope that they have some big conflict by the end. But yeah, all the interactions that they've had with each other have been gold. Like whether it's been their first interaction back on the ship or even this episode, I enjoyed a great deal. They're bickering, like very polite bickering that they had back and forth with one another. And go ahead. I didn't know. Oh, okay. But
yeah. Well, no, the one thing I forgot, one of my favorite lines from this episode too, and it kind of expresses a lot of the themes, and it made me think a lot, was this isn't a place of no's, this is a place of yeses.
Yeses.
I mean, that was so good. And really that summarizes like all the themes of this, and in some ways of most of the Alien franchise. I can't say I've analyzed every episode, but at least the Ridley Scott and the James Cameron
Yeah.
movies, the themes were kind of in that world.
For sure. And then I was going to say also, lastly, even with the creatures, I've appreciated just the new wrinkle of having new creatures. I do like that choice because, just like, and he said this in an interview, Noah, is we've become extremely acclimated to how the xenomorph works. And don't get me wrong, it's an awesome, boogeyman, it's an awesome monster, but we have to find a way to kind of re-experience that same feeling that the xenomorph brought when we didn't know a whole lot about it. And that's why I have these new creatures. So I love that they have creatures that are obviously dangerous to humans, but we have some that are dangerous to humans and hybrids. And we also have, now that we had this episode, we have one that's actually specifically dangerous to inorganic. So I enjoy that fact that there aren't any characters that are safe, because I know there was a concern earlier with the series that they were kind of going to make the hybrids almost invincible, where because they were inorganic, that it kind of provided them a protection or a shield against a lot of these creatures. And now we know that that's not the case.
It started to feel a little like they were going in a superhero direction, almost like, the hybrids were super powered and they could do all this stuff and they were protected. Yeah. The thing, and I'm sure this has been debated a million times on many different podcasts. The only downside, and I have no problem with this because I agree. I think there's a limitation to an extent of the xenomorphs and we've seen other movies with xenomorphs. I don't need to see a rehash of the same movie over and over again.
Yeah.
But the danger is, and I don't really have this danger, it's the Rogue One factor. You watch Darth Vader do what he does at the end of Rogue One. And then you go to the next movie and he kind of just stands there with a lightsaber and you're like, what? This show, at least there can be a rational, that can be a cover up. There can be, you know what I mean? They can keep it under wraps. So it still makes total sense. But in some ways it'd be hard to watch this before you watched Alien or something. You'd almost have to watch it in order of when they came out, which I think is the best way to watch Star Wars as well. But yeah, there is kind of a Rogue One factor to all this, which I'm sure some people are kind of going crazy about.
But to your to that point, there, and I know there are folks out there that don't really count this as a part of the franchise, and I understand why when we're talking about what is it, Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection. I'm assuming you've seen Resurrection, but at the end of Resurrection, they make it to Earth, and Earth is basically a wasteland. So who knows? Maybe if we really are counting the events of Resurrection, maybe in some weird way, slowly but surely, Earth goes down that path of being completely destroyed. To the unknowing knowledge of all the characters that we know in the alien universe, because they've all been out in space the entire time, thinking that Earth is, still the Earth that they left, and not being the Earth that somehow got destroyed, little to their, knowledge, by these creatures over time. So
yeah. You want to know what's weird? I saw Resurrection. I don't remember that. I think I only saw it one time.
Yeah.
I think I only saw it one time in the theater, and I was like, I wasn't a huge fan of it.
Right.
My Alien franchise, for me, Aliens was the first one I saw in the theater, and I loved it. But the Alien comic book, strangely enough, the Alien comic book, Heavy Metal made an Alien graphic novel in the 1970s when I was a little kid. And I was too young to see the movie when it came out. But somebody gave me that comic book, and I read it end to end thousands and thousands of times. So it was like a Bible for me of horror in some ways. It was a really well done graphic novel. That's hard to find now, but
for sure.
But anyway, Resurrection, I saw it in the theater, but I don't remember much about it. Yeah, it happened. I saw it. I don't even know that I hated it or disliked it. I was just kind of like, maybe they should have stopped at Aliens at the time. I was like, maybe they should have stopped.
A lot of people feel that way. A lot of people feel that way. So I mean, I get it. And I mean, if what is it? I can't think of his name. If he had his way, we would have gotten kind of like a reboot after Aliens. Who did District 9?
Blomkamp or whatever. Neil. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but with that said, that wraps up this edition of Game Over. Jamie, thank you so much of diving into this episode 6 of season 1, hopefully, of Alien Earth. Before I let you go, can you tell folks where they can find you?
Yeah, sure. You can find me at www. Do you say that anymore? I don't know. JamieNash.net. And I have a new book out, Save the Cat Writes for Horror. If you're a writer, you can check out my new book. It just came out Tuesday. I also have a horror book out. I might as well show that. Haunted Girl, one of my new book. It's a novel. But the interesting thing about Save the Cat Writes for Horror, I break down aliens in it. That's what I use to demo because it's one of my favorite movies. So you can check that out.
Awesome stuff. So there you guys have it. Again, I want to thank Jamie for hopping on to talk about episode 6 of Alien Earth in this edition of Game Over. I'm your host, Brandon Choi, co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. You can find me at Brandon Choi ENT, as well as Brandon Choi _ENT on Instagram. And then I want to also punt it over to you, Jamie. You have one other thing to bring up for tomorrow. Yes.
Oh, I'm not gonna be there tomorrow. I'm only there today.
Gotcha.
But a lot of my friends, the Night Watchman, Dan Franco might be there tomorrow. You could see a lot of those guys, but I was only there today.
Gotcha.
But
cool.
But if you go, check those guys out.
Absolutely. So there you guys have it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be safe out there and see you guys.